E ngā mana, e ngā waka, e ngā iwi, e ngā reo, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. The information technology revolution is the best idea we've had since we invented language. Individually, we have piled in with gusto. Already well over half of the world's population is electronically connected one way or another. But when it comes to using this technology in our organizations, we're not so good. And for chapter and verse on how well we're not doing, I can recommend this document from Ted Zorn and Margaret Richardson at Waikato University, which has chapter and verse on how we got here, where we are, and how much work there is left to do. It's a good baseline, tells us where we've come to, but what it is not intended to do and what it can't do is tell us how we need to go on from here and what we need to do about it. What it can't tell us is why it is so often that when it comes to this technology, we find ourselves with one of these, when what we really need is one of these, or God help me, one of these. So we have quite a lot of these, followed by recriminations and bad language in the hunt for scapegoats. The good news is that there are no scapegoats worth having, so you might as well not waste your time hunting for them and invest that time instead by reading this. It's a great study that was done at the University of Otago a few years ago, and the question that it asked is, why is it that so many New Zealand government IT projects become train wrecks? And they have some very interesting findings about how organizations make bad decisions in this area. It's worth reading for that alone. They also came up with a sort of rule of thumb, which goes something like this. The nearer to $10 million goes the cost of your project, the nearer to 100% is the probability that it will fail significantly in some spectacular way. It'll be hugely late, it'll be grossly over budget, it'll be magnificently underperforming, or the people for whom you build it and design it will refuse to use it. And that failure begins from the first dollar and grows exponentially from there. They also found that non-profits are about as bad as government, and frankly, the private sector is not much better. There's always, however, someone to blame. And these are the usual suspects. I'd like to quickly go through them because I think it's illuminating for how we think about this stuff. Setting aside for a moment the fact that our entire economy depends on people selling us stuff we don't need and can't use, the real problem that I think occurs is that when we sit down with a salesperson, we have a conversation where both people ask questions that the other doesn't understand. Both of them give answers that they don't understand. And then they come to an agreement that they don't actually share, and it all goes downhill from there. And I think there are really clear, important, perfectly good reasons why that happens. And I'll try to touch on them a bit later on. But if you're looking for someone to blame, it's not there. Maybe it's our process. If we got a better process, if we followed it more carefully, we wouldn't have these problems. Well, the news is that some of the biggest disasters happen in organizations that are sticklers for process. See, your process can help you implement an idea perfectly, but apparently it can't tell you that it was a dumb idea in the first place. So no, wrong place to look. We've all seen some version of this. I've done it myself. Yes, your staff are afraid. They're afraid of losing their job. And now comes somebody who wants them to take a task that they're perfectly competent at and to do it using a completely different set of tools in an entirely different way on a piece of technology for which they're not adequately trained. They're terrified they're going to screw up and lose their job. Then they can't pay their mortgage, they lose their house, their family, their marriage. They might as well jump off a cliff. And by the way, they have a nasty and often justified suspicion that the organization is doing this so that they can fire some of them because now we're so much more efficient. Add to that the significant rate of underperformance of the programs, and I can't blame anybody for not being wholly invested in the latest great idea that they brought. These guys take a lot of stick as well. But actually you need their paranoia, because they spend far too much of their time trying to stop some idiot with a thumb drive full of viruses, plugging it into your network, and then fixing the damage that's done afterwards. They also, by the way, are trying to stretch a shrinking budget over what you're doing now, let alone some new idea that's ever more complicated and potentially even more insecure. Oh yes, and 10 times a month they have to show the boss how to attach a document to an email. Whatever else, these people are too busy for you to blame. What about our bosses? One of the propositions in Ted Zorn and Margaret Richardson's survey was that our organisation has decision makers with a high level of knowledge of information technology. Now, I don't even need to go on, do I? In 2005, 4% said, yep, that's us. In 2008, it was 36.3%. At this rate, all of our decision makers will be up to speed in about 62 years. I don't think we can afford to wait that long. And by the way, leadership from the top, leadership from the top is even worse. Oh, all right, I missed something off. Okay, so the question, however, is how do we get our decision makers to a position where they are able to make good decisions about information technology? Coming to events like this, good start. Reading some of the books I'll show you, that's a good start too. Taking part in discussions and seminars. But actually it's less like passing an exam than it is learning to ride a bicycle. And I've got a couple of ideas about how that might work, but I really, really do not know. It's something that we're going to have to do. What I do know is you can't blame the technology. It's doing exactly what we tell it. Now, of course, if we tell it to do something that is just a little tiny bit wrong, then it'll take that little tiny bit wrong and multiply it 1,000,000 times in a heartbeat, and what was completely invisible under a manual system is now crushing us completely. And speed actually matters. It really does change the things that it touches. For example, a jumbo jet at 80 k's is just a big building on the move. At 280 k's, it's a bird. And it changes the character of that device. Now, your organisation will be changed in, by the way, unpredictable ways. We don't know what kind of bird it'll become. Is it a sparrowhawk, an albatross? Who knows? And we can't predict it. The other thing that it does, and immediately, is that it amplifies your organisation. It amplifies the good, it amplifies the bad, it amplifies the errors. And we have no way of controlling what it amplifies, when it amplifies it, and by how much. But this is just information technology doing what it does. It's not a fault, it's a feature. Speaking of control, what about these guys? Surely they have the authority to make things happen. They set policy, they set direction. Maybe it's their problem. Well, actually, it's not. Because as soon as you plug this technology into any environment, what you get is loss of control and distribution of power. And any governance body that is not prepared for that is going to be shocked, may make bad decisions, and will come off very badly. So, all right, it looks like a hopeless case. Why don't we just forget it all, throw it all away, and go back to doing things the way we used to? Actually, this is part of the problem. We are trying to use this technology as if it was nothing more than this. We spend a lot of time and effort trying to rein it in and stop doing that. And as I'm sure Andrew Mardle will tell you, we can't afford that kind of luxury anymore. We have to find a way to deal with it. And we're not going back. Back in 1996, I went to Island Bay School, and a teacher talked about how she was using computers in the classroom and the library. Then she asked for questions, and somebody said, "So, what are the educational outcomes of using this technology in your classroom?" And I'll never forget her response. She said, "So what are the outcomes of using electric lights instead of candles? It's just the way we do things now." And we have in our organizations to realize that it is just the way we do things now. So what are we going to do about this? Well, I think we need to redefine the problem. We need to forget about technology. Technology as the solution, technology as the problem, forget it. What we need to focus on is the information. I don't care what your organization does, whether it makes fire engines or fur hats, whether it does computers in homes or supports the homeless. It consists in and of nothing but information. And in that, even a very little bit of information. You can change a lot about an organization. All of this stuff can be changed, and yet the people who work in it will say, "I've worked for this organization for years." So what is the organization part of this? I say it's a very small story that we tell ourselves about who we are and what we do and why we do it. There's a very small thing that we're dealing with that is actually the organization, and that's important. We also capture some of that in a whole bunch of documents. They're important too, mostly because they get in the way. Organizations are not just constructed of information, it's everything about them. Holds them together, enables them to work, drives them along, provides the structure and the process. And we have to understand that that applies to every organization. And if you start fiddling with the way information works in your organization, this is what you're doing. You're creating a situation where you're trying to pick your own brains. Now, that's non-trivial, and you might want an instruction manual. So can I recommend these guys? They did some research in the late 90s about how information works in Xerox Corporation. And they found a whole lot of fascinating stuff about it. But the most important thing that they discovered was this. This is how every organization functions at all. This is not add-on. This is not subversion of the way things work. This is how it works. And all of that breaking of the rules is culturally communicated. And I'll give you the perfect example. Remember these guys? Let me show you their business plan. Practically every line in that business plan is a criminal offense, as we discovered in the end. Does anybody here believe that that was written down anywhere as the business plan for Enron? Of course not. But everybody who worked for Enron knew exactly that that is how we do business. And every organization, give or take the criminal intent and practice, works in exactly the same way. That's how organizations function. Then we come to this. We look inside our organizations, so we're breaking the rules everywhere. We had better get some control of this, get some order. Let's have a CRM or an ERP or some other kind of process that we can institute electronically that will make it work. So we take these documents and we give them to the software people and we say, instantiate this in the code so that everybody checks off all the boxes in the right order and we've got an audit trail and all that kind of stuff and everything will be cool. Then we encounter the organization. Anybody tell me how you cripple an organization without going on strike?
Take down their emails.
Well, you take that, but there's another way. It's an old way. Oops. We just spent 10 million bucks forcing our entire organization to work to rule. No wonder we're going to hell in a handbasket. So maybe we need a doctor. I'll come to her in a moment. Herman Miller Furniture was a great early adopter of information technology. They did all kinds of, I'm not going to make it in a minute, stretch me. They used information technology for a whole lot of things in their sales area. And somebody said, yeah, okay, so we know who bought what when, but we don't know the relationship with that organization. We don't know how we sell to them, why they buy from us, all that kind of stuff. Why don't we have this really good CRM where we can actually capture all that and attach it to their sales record? Immediate response. Two groups of people in this audience. One, the salespeople who said, that's what keeps me from getting fired. If I give you all that stuff, I become fungible. No way in the world am I going to tell you all those things. The other group of people, by the way, are the lawyers who went, no, we actually know what happens in some of those sales conversations and we really don't want that stuff to be discoverable. So just when you get something going, don't assume that you can push it to the absolute limit. It doesn't necessarily go a step beyond that. This doctor is a person who you might want to call on. While the guys from Xerox were doing their investigation about how information works in their organization, she was doing the same work in academia. And she discovered exactly the same thing. Pretty much none of your documentation tells you how your organization actually functions. But unlike them, what she said was, I think we have an answer. What we need to do is draw a map of the ropes. The ropes in an organization, as in here, let me show you the ropes, are an informal set of relationships. They're mediated by trust. They not only cut across hierarchy, but where people in the hierarchy can't be trusted, it circuits around them. And what you get out of that is a body of knowledge which is completely unwritten, unspoken. It's a unique byproduct of all the relationships in the organization. You change some relationships, you change that set of knowledge, and you change the way things are done in organizations. But what she also said was, we can draw a map of that. And there are important points in that map. There are cultural carriers who do that rule breaking, who manage it in your organization. Hubs have lots of relationships within an organization, one-to-one. Gatekeepers connect the parts together. Such a shame we fired all those tea ladies and postboys, because in some organizations, they were the gatekeepers. These days, it's probably your IT support person, by the way. And then there are the pulse takers. Hello, I've just unplugged myself. Then there are the pulse takers. And they're the people who maintain the institutional knowledge. And they give or withhold approval. If you don't know who those people are in your organization and you don't have them on side, it doesn't matter what you want to do, you're asking for trouble. If you have them on side, it doesn't guarantee that it'll work, but if you don't have them there, then you're not going to be able to achieve whatever change you want to make. You can map them. Karen Stevenson can show you how. So, one more restating of the problem. This is how so many of us see our organizations, as devices, systems, tools for performing work. And when we fiddle with information technology, what we're trying to do is change the piston rings while the engine is still running, and we know that's not possible. So we do what we can. We plug things in. We bolt them on around the outside. Then we find that, oh, we've plugged up the inlet manifold, and we've pulled out a couple of spark plug leads, and we bunged up the exhaust. We've got all this new technology, and a perfectly running organization has ceased to function the way we want. The problem is that this is the wrong way of looking at it. Can we please just throw away these kinds of ideas and replace it with that? Can you raise your hand, please, if you can see the old woman? Okay. Can you raise your hand if you can see the young woman? Can you raise your hand if at will you can choose which woman you see? Can you raise your hand now if you can tell me where the woman is?
On the wall.
No. She's in here. Because some of you can see the old woman and some of you can see the young woman, and it's a matter of perspective. Now, that's just a bunch of marks on a screen. It might as well be some marks representing your organization. And the real task we have is to shift our perspective about our organization. To move from the old woman, who is the product of the way things used to be, the stamp books and the typewriters and the telephones, and see it as the young woman who is the product of a networked world and a connected society. And once we do that, then all our decisions about how we use technology and what technology we need and how we make it function in our organization will get a lot easier and a lot more effective. Anyway, that's what I think. Thanks for your time.